Okay. Emmy, what do you think? Like one more minute and we can
Yeah,
get
I mean, we
started?
can get started. People can join and
I'll keep an eye on the waiting room. Um, and then I'm just gonna, like position my Zoom window so I can see everyone's faces for those that are so nice to see some familiar faces. Wow. Um, okay. All right. Someone else just popped in the waiting room, but we can get started. Um, Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are doing a workshop together called Partnering with Teachers, A Parent's Guide to Conferences. We are so excited to have you here. For those of you who I haven't met, it's so nice to meet you and lots of familiar faces from different walks of life, too. So happy to see you all. I'm going to start with a quick intro, then I'm going to pass it on to Emmy, who I'm so excited to be partnering with today, and we will get started because we have a lot to talk about. So, hello, my name is Dr. Chloe Massey. I am a child development specialist, a parenting educator. Most importantly, for our conversation tonight, I am a former teacher. My work right now is really centered on supporting parents in understanding both parenting and child development. I am a mom to three boys, two of whom are school age. So, this is really, really top of mind because I am also going into conference season and having these conversations. Now I have a private virtual practice supporting parents, which I'll talk about a little bit at the end. But aside from being an educator, professor, I'm also a consultant. And my goal, and I hope this comes across today, is really to take the research and the best practices and make them really digestible so you can walk away with some really solid strategies that you can cater to fit your family. So, with that being said, I'm so excited to have Emmy introduce herself, and it's such a treat. We're so aligned in our beliefs and how we teach and work with families. So, Emmy, off to you.
yeah. Well, thank you, Chloe. My name's Emmy. For those of you who don't know me, I am also a former classroom teacher. I primarily taught in self-contained special education class from grades first through third. However, I've also taught preschool through high school. So I have a very wide range of experience. And I also do private practice. I have an educational services company called Your Learning Toolbox, and we provide academic tutoring, executive functioning coaches, and coaching for students grades K through 8. And we are parent school liaisons, which means that we collaborate with families and schools to bridge that communication to foster collaboration between school and home. And we work with students virtually and in person. I have the team in New York City, and I'm based in Fairfield County with some other wonderful team members. And I also have a son, he's 17 months old. And he's not school age yet, although he does go to school. And we are going to have a parent teacher conference, which will be exciting. And I'm excited to be on the other side of the table for that. And so this conversation is really top of mind for me as well, for my clients, for me personally. And like Chloe said, we're super like-minded. We have a lot of the same foundational beliefs, and it's really wonderful to get to do this with her.
Thank you, Emmy. Yeah, we want this to feel, as we were talking and planning this together, we really want it to feel like the best use of your time. So please, like, you don't need to raise your hand. Please pop in the chat. Please call out loud if you have questions. This is for you. It's also for us, but it's for you. So with that being said, Emmy, you want to cover the agenda?
Yeah. So, like Chloe said, job we don't want to be super formal. But we're gonna start by just sharing why conferences matter. Then we're gonna get into how to prepare yourself, ground yourself in some really good strategies to get ready for conferences. Then we'll talk a little bit about understanding teacher feedback, some things that might come up during a conference. We'll share about red flags versus developmental variation, things to keep in mind during conferences and post conference. Then we'll also talk about understanding the big picture, your child in the whole class, and just really zooming out and giving you that perspective as well. We'll share some great tools and tips on how to partner with teachers. And then we'll get into some home tips, tips for home, homework, executive functioning, academic, social emotional, all the things that might come up that will be helpful in that regard. And then we're going to talk about some things that might come up if conferences turn tough, some tough moments, give you some tips and tools for that as well. Then we'll get to some question and answer, more formalized, but like, drop those questions in throughout the meeting if something's coming up, and then we will wrap up.
Perfect. So let's start with why conferences matter. And I want to just kick us off by saying tonight we're speaking just generally about parent-teacher conferences. So if your child has specific learning needs or learning differences, we're not speaking specifically to IEP meetings, for example. However, I will say so much of what we talk about tonight can be applied in other school contexts and meetings. So I hope you're able to take flexibly what we share and apply it to your kids. I know I didn't say this, but a lot of my background is in working with students with learning disabilities. That's what my research is focused on. So a lot of what we're saying from both of our private practices does come from that background. But we're just speaking generally. So if you have specific questions about your child, please bring them at the end, or we'll share our emails. But really, parent-teacher conferences are one of the few times during the school year when you and your child's teacher are sitting down together, only focused on your child. Okay, so it is a moment to pause and to reflect and to actually understand how your child is doing across the school setting. And what we mean by that, Emmy and I are really focused on the whole child. So academically, socially, and emotionally. And you can see these icons on the slide. The goal is really connection, clarity, and collaboration, which as former teachers, we feel the collaboration piece is huge. Fall conferences are a little bit different than spring. It's really about setting goals and getting to know each other, parent and teacher. The spring conferences, for those of you that have been through it before, those are a little bit different because you've had many, many months behind you. So, a couple of things here. We, as former teachers, know a lot about what happens behind the scenes. And from our perspective, conferences are really great because they give you that insider perspective that as a parent, I mean, I'm almost never in my son's school. I volunteer every so often, but I'm really not in the school environment. So I would encourage you to not only get a sense of their performance, which I know is top of mind for lots of parents, but also what does their day look like? What are those transitions? How are they interacting with peers? Those of you that are my clients in this room or that know me well know that I'm talking about the social and emotional growth just as much as the academic growth. That's really, really essential. Um, I think the other element here is just to recognize in talking about why conferences matter, that as parents, these meetings can feel emotionally charged. It can be stressful for you and your partner or co-parent. You can go in with your own anxieties. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go. But the goal, the end goal of these conferences is to support your child, to be the advocate for them, which remember, you are their greatest advocate. And these meetings can feel overwhelming. So getting that clarity before you go in is really important. And that's really our goal today. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how you prepare yourself for conferences. I think to begin, I would say, and I do this myself, starting with you, just notice what your baseline and triggers are. So I'll give you an example. I have learning disabilities. Growing up, I would say reading did not come easily to me. And it's definitely top of mind for me when I go into my kids' conferences. I feel like I am at the ready waiting to hear that they're having a similar struggle to me. So that's something I think about before I go into conferences, but really regulating yourself to feel calm and as clear as possible is really important. The other piece, if you have a parent or a co-parent, sorry, a partner or a co-parent going into the conference with you, talk beforehand. The conference should not be the first place where you are talking about your child in their classroom setting. So get aligned. Like, what are the goals? What are the questions? What's top of mind for you? recognizing that may not be top of mind for your partner, but it's worth bringing to the conference. I will say, having sat on the teacher side for many years, seeing a unified team of parents makes it so much easier to support the child when it is like we are all working together, not against each other. The final thing I'll say is if you are going into conferences and there is a topic that you're actually nervous about already, let's say you're really wondering about your child's social skills at school, and that's a concern of yours, reach out before the conference and put it on your teacher's radar. So, what I would recommend is a simple email. Email the teacher. I'm thinking a lot about Alex's social skills. It's top of mind for the two of us. We would love if you could talk about this during the conference. It's helpful for the teacher, so she's not caught off guard. And it also is a way of saying, this is what's on my mind. Let's make sure that we talk about it. Okay. So I'm going to pass it on to Emmy.
Yeah, so you are going to walk into parent teacher conference, and like Chloe said, it might be the first time you are sitting in your child's classroom as an observer. And so it's really interesting to kind of take that all in. You're going to hear feedback, but there's feedback happening all around you. So I'd say first thing you're going to want to make sure to do, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, is really scan the room. Where does my child sit? What does their desk look like? What supports are nearby? So that way, when you hear feedback from the teacher, like that's we'll talk about, I talk a lot about multisensory learning. Like that's the first piece is the visual. You're going to hear auditory feedback from the teacher, right? They're typically going to start broad. Here's so and so. This is the activities they really like in school. This is how they've acclimated, general. They're going to also typically give feedback in a feedback sandwich, right? Like positive, some areas to work on, and then end with the positive. So just have that in mind as well. You will probably get some work samples and see some assessments. Take those with a grain of salt. I tell all the families that I work with, assessments are just part of the picture, right? There is, a teacher shows you a really great spelling test, wonderful. You can ask questions on that, right? How did they deliver that? Were you sharing the words out loud? Did they have time to review it beforehand? Like, what did that look like? Give me more information. Don't just take everything as face value. And so every school does this a little differently. Every teacher does this differently. You might only have 5 minutes with the teacher. And so, like Chloe said, you have something top of mind, start with that. Look at the work samples, see the assessments, and just kind of take it as is, and really that be part of the picture. We are going to give you a takeaway sheet. You'll get that emailed, and there's going to be a whole glossary of phrases that you might hear during a conference. This is just a short list. I'm not going to define, them right this second, take up our precious time by doing that. But if there is a term that you're wondering about, drop it in the chat. We will answer those questions, but just know that that's going to be a resource that's coming to you. If a teacher says something during the conference, you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about when you say number sense, ask it. And you'll also have some places to take notes on our sheet. So write down terms that you hear during your conference, come back to it at a later date if you don't have enough time during the actual conference.
I think that's such a good point. I find that education more than any field, the acronyms are so overwhelming. I even did it myself and said IEP, which many
Yeah.
people aren't familiar with. So I think, don't be afraid to ask those questions. And it's good for teachers too to remember to slow down and actually define.
Yeah, there's a lot of acronyms of 3 letters in
Yes, it's
education,
too
so you will
much.
hear a
It's
lot
too
of that.
much. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about red flags versus developmental variation. We really wanted to come up with a better word than red flags, but ultimately we wanted parents to know what we were talking about on this slide. If you know me in my practice, I almost never say the word normal because there is such variation in how students develop. And so I, at all costs, try and avoid normal because I don't think it makes anyone feel normal at all, actually. I think it really sends people into a spiral. I do think that this is one of the trickiest areas for parents figuring out what is typical in quotes versus what might need a deeper look. So I want to remind you guys, I want to start by reminding you that development is not linear. So kids, and I see this in my kids, I see this in my boys, but kids can make huge jumps and then they can plateau. And that is actually all part of the process. So let's just break this down a little bit. Areas to watch, which is terminology teachers may use, or you might see more likely in a written report card, doesn't automatically mean that something is wrong. Rather, it's something to monitor and support. And sometimes it helps my clients tell me that when they reframe this as like what feedback might look like in the workplace, it doesn't mean you're failing and losing your job. You've got something to work on. And we honestly all want something to work on. If you are noticing with your child patterns that persist, so I'll give you a few examples: frustration, serious frustration, avoidance consistently, major inconsistencies in their work, or widening skill gaps. Okay. That's when you should check in with the teacher. If you're seeing something that doesn't feel right, do not hang on to it. Bring it to the teacher because the number one most important question is this showing up at school and at home? We look for consistency when we're noticing a, again, in quotes, a red flag. You may be seeing a behavior like avoidance that the teacher doesn't see. That likely has to do with the fact that your child's kept it together all day. They didn't avoid, and they're coming home and they are losing it, which in child development, we talk about how that's a great thing. You're their safe place. They feel secure, but in actuality, it's really hard to get the kid that's a disaster at the end of the day. Um, I really would encourage you when it comes to these red flags or challenges that may be coming up, lean on the teaching team because they are seeing your child across multiple settings and across different times of day. And this is crucial. I come back, especially in early childhood. If there's something that's coming up as a challenge, like an area to watch, I always ask, what time of day is this being done? If it's being done at 2 p.m., yeah, of course that's an area to watch. Like a kid in third grade is really struggling by that time of day. When you hear language like above grade level or on grade level or below grade level, it is a snapshot. It's not a judgment. Teachers need some way to evaluate. That's where those terms come from, but it is not a judgment. And then I would say just a couple more things regarding this. You want to ask the teachers what specific skills are strong and what are emerging. Number one, it's great to talk to your kids about what they're doing really well and what they're continuing to work on. It makes it more actionable if you have the exact words. Um, and that
I
is,
just wanted to add
yeah, go ahead, Emmy.
one more thing that
Yeah.
we didn't touch on, or we will continue to touch on. Executive functioning skills develop way later in life. So, like Chloe
Yes.
said, 2 p.m., right? Time awareness, like they are holding it together all day. Your brain develops from back to front. Your executive functioning skills are right here, and they don't completely develop to your mid 20s. So, that is really important to keep in mind in the big picture of what this looks like at school, what certain skills are impacted by their executive functioning skills. And a lot of academics and executive function skills are really intertwined at this age. So, it does get a little murky. So just keep that in mind as we are thinking about red flags and variation in development. It varies day to day, and these skills are emerging and work and developing as in real time.
That's such a great point. Thank you. And you just reminded me, Emmy, also, because I know we've got some people in the room with younger kids who have just started kindergarten. Depending on your child's age, you might notice a greater range in skills. This is really important. I'm going to just talk younger for one sec. In kindergarten, for example, some kids are coming from a play-based program, play-based preschool, where they have had almost no exposure to direct instruction around reading. And some kids are coming from an academic preschool where they may be early readers. Okay. So, again, depending on the age and stage, there may be more variation. And connected to that, if you have multiple kids and you've gone through conferences with one and you haven't gone through conferences with the other, comparison can be absolutely the most challenging part of this. If you're like, oh, my son was a really, really strong mathematician, and now my other son, I'm surprised he's not doing it the same way. So remember that even if your kids come from the same parents, their skills are different, their temperaments are different, and we really want to avoid comparison as much as we can because it doesn't make anyone feel good. All right, off to you, Emmy.
Yeah, and I think this is a nice point to kind of wrap up the first part of what we've been talking about, understanding the big picture. That's kind of where we started, just the zoom out of, while these conferences are super focused on your child and we really want specifics, let's just take a breath because fluctuation is normal and expected for us as adults, and especially for young children who are experiencing a lot, developing so many ways, and experiencing some environmental changes as well, like taking into account being sick. What did they eat for breakfast? Is mom or dad away? Like what changes are happening in their day-to-day life? How are they holding it together? So fluctuation in attention, in availability to learn, frustration, availability for academics, like that is so much part of the big picture. And getting it going back to the specifics, even an assessment, you might think like, oh, let's see the date that assessment was taken. What was happening in our life at that point, right? That might have been oh, that day they were just getting over like the stomach bug. Oh, that's why maybe they didn't perform as well as we thought. So just keep that in mind. Everything is part of the big picture. And I think what Chloe was mentioning too, right? Finding a great balance between individual growth, group expectation, keeping in mind child development, and the variations that come with each child is really important. And we just want to make sure overall that there's growth over time, which means starting in September, are they working on skills that by June are developing, right? The arrow is going up, but it can also look like a zigzag line, and it often does when we're thinking about these skills. And there could be a burst when it's like a shoot, the line shoots way up, and then there's times when there's some regression, and we have to just keep in mind what's happening in our child's life at that moment. And just overall, are we progressing? And I'll say that, if there are hard moments and fluctuations happen, well, we often find that like right after conferences, things might get tricky after a big break from school, around January, and after February break, spring break, like a lapse in that structure of school, hard times happen. And we're here, and we'll talk a little bit more later on about how you can reach out to us, but that's where we come in. And so, don't feel like you're alone, and this is all expected.
Yeah.
Um,
I really like what you were saying, Emmy, because I think the other piece of this is we are also growing over time. There's really interesting research that shows that brain plasticity doesn't end. So we are able to continue to learn through the lifespan. And if you have opportunities to talk to your kid about something that you're working on or something that you're learning, I think it's really valuable. I'll never forget the first time I told one of my classes when I was teaching second grade, "Oh my gosh, I made a mistake. I spelled this word wrong." And a kid was like, "Mrs. Massey, you spelled a word wrong?" I was like, "Actually, spelling can be really hard for me. It's something I'm working on." And it shocked them. And so I'm always saying, really try and normalize what you're working on too, when, obviously in an appropriate way. I want to talk a little bit now about partnering with teachers, which is obviously a huge part of our conversation tonight. First of all, we've talked a little bit about how conferences can be tense. I think they can be tense between partners, and I think they can be tense depending on your child's learning profile, to be honest, or your expectations. Sometimes we expect our kids to be learners like we were, and they're not. So coming in ready to collaborate is really important. Sometimes, and I felt this as a parent, where you're coming in like ready to attack. It doesn't get anyone anywhere. So, what I would recommend is if you haven't already, start by asking your child's teacher, what's the best way to communicate? What's the best way for me to be in touch with you? Is it phone? Is it email? There are all these other platforms now that teachers use. Um, and then when you're talking to your child's teacher, think about the fact that they are often juggling 15 at least, but more likely 20 to 25 students with different personalities, different needs, different learning profiles. It's a lot. They can't see everything that happens at home. That's where your communication makes a big difference. That's what Emmy was talking about. If you're sick, if there's like an illness in the home, if you're traveling, if there's a move, if you've got a grandparent living in the home. These are things teachers need to know. I was just away for a couple days with my husband and I emailed both my kids' teachers and I said, just a heads up, we're out of town. The routine's different. Just want to let you know. Um, a good example of where communication can really serve you well is when it comes to homework, which Emmy's going to dive into. We need to do a whole other workshop on homework, by the way, but Emmy's going to dive into that in a little bit. But I just want to say if something at home feels like a constant battle, that conversation needs to be shared with your teacher. And I'll just give a quick personal anecdote where reading was really challenging for us at home for my second grader. 20 minutes of reading, it just wasn't working. And so I mentioned this to the teacher and we came up with a new plan for my son. He's not quite ready for 20 minutes. So we're doing a different amount of minutes each evening. The accommodation was so easy, she just needed to hear it from me so we can make a change that works.
Yeah,
Um,
go ahead, Chloe.
no, I was just going to say like more of that because teachers, the message I got from my son's teacher was, I really appreciate that. I never would know.
No, it's so helpful. And just coming from like the lens of just backing up when we were teachers, when we're classroom teachers, when you're coming in, like let's be honest, our kids do some annoying things and have tough days. And so if you can come in as a parent, kind of ready to collaborate and kind of owning that, the teacher is gonna look at your child on a day that's a tougher day, like, I hear you, like your parents are ready to collaborate. Like, just having that good attitude and partnering with the teachers can do a lot for your child too. And just keeping the teachers, in a positive space with you and your family is always
Yeah.
just keep that in mind.
100%. And that served me well a lot as a teacher, being like, they've got so much going on at home. Let me do what I can. Let me be flexible where I can. Okay. Emmy, on to you.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about what to ask in the conference, asking the right questions because time is rushed there, can fly by. And we want to make sure that you're going into the conversation prepared and then also getting information that you want. We've been in conferences where the parents don't ask questions, and then you get an email like the day later, and you're like, I said all that, or just like, where was this yesterday when we were meeting? And so coming in prepared to collaborate, have your right questions ready to go is super helpful. Some really good advice is just to be really specific. Think about pre-plan, as Chloe mentioned, what areas you want to ask about, and ask specific questions. On the next slide, I'm going to share some questions that we came up with. But have a plan and then ask follow-up questions and just really be present during this conversation. So here are some examples. General classroom experience, right? We might want to know, and these can vary, and some are applicable to your children and some are not. But when and where does my child seem most engaged and successful during the school day? This is going to give you so much insight into what activities are really successful for them. Are they hands-on activities? Is it more, activities that are based in music or movement or visual, right? That's helpful for us as parents. What's going well at school? And that will, shed light on also your child's interest. What time of the day are they successful? That's really helpful to bring home to your child too. Like, oh, your teacher said that, you really love doing morning meeting. It's going so well. And that also can give you insight into what time of day are they most successful. Ask the teacher, what's going well at school? Oh, what time of day is that? Does that activity change day to day, or is it always consistently at 9 a.m.? Did they just eat after that activity, right? So just keep in mind what's going on, but be really specific about your questions and follow-up questions. When does my child need the most support throughout the day? That's kind of like the opposite question to the one before it. And then ask questions. What does support look like? If they need a lot of support at lunch, that tells you a lot, right? Is lunch structured, unstructured? Do they have, peers that they can choose to sit with, or is it a little more assigned? And then you can kind of have a follow-up question conversation with the teacher about that. Executive functioning and independence, I could create a whole other conference about all the questions you might want to ask, but just simply, and these are more conversation starters than really just one-off questions, but how does my child manage routines, transitions, and following directions? This is going to give you a lot, and there are going to be some hefty answers. And that's really helpful if you're bringing in an outside provider like Chloe or I to know this type of information as well. School
Emmy,
day,
can I just add here
please.
because
Yeah.
schools have shifted a little bit? I would encourage you to ask, what do you do in the classroom to support executive function skills? I think some schools are starting to do a little bit, but no one is doing as much as they should.
Yeah.
It's, I think, really helpful to get a sense of what they're focusing on. It'll also give you clarity for what you should focus on at home. I know that's more Emmy's wheelhouse than mine. But yeah,
Yeah, but
sorry to
piggybacking off
interject.
that, right, school to home connection, that is going to be a huge insight into that. Very important. This will be my like one takeaway. If you have a child who is getting homework, you must ask, what should homework look like at home? What is the expectation? And how can we support our child's learning without over helping? We want to build independence. We want to build those real world consequences of, oh, you forgot to do your homework. Like, depending on your child's age and what's appropriate, you might want to build in that those real consequences that could come up when they forgot their homework. So ask your child's teacher, what's the plan if they don't do their homework, if they refuse, if they are really struggling, how much should I help them? What should I do? And how should that look? And that's super important. And just ask that. Your teachers will have opinions. And then for academic and social emotional skills, what are the key goals for my child's grade in areas like reading, writing, math, and social emotional learning? That might be a really hefty question, and you might want to pick one piece out, like, if there's an area that you're concerned about or your child struggles with, just ask. And then how can we reinforce those skills at home? And so a lot of these questions, focus on collaboration and really do foster that sense of communication collaboration with the teaching team, which is so important.
Okay, so on to a big topic, Emmy, which I know maybe at
Yeah.
some point we'll do another workshop
Gonna
on.
be a hefty one.
Yeah.
Chloe and I were talking a little bit about this, right? So homework is gonna probably be the biggest source of pain point in at home. And there's a lot that goes into homework. And I'm gonna start off by just saying broadly why, and not broadly, I'm gonna kind of break it down a little bit. Homework, it takes into account academics, which is a heavy load, right? Academics at the end of the day, executive functioning skills, it takes into account your task initiation, inhibition, focus, time awareness, time management, organization of materials, of time, self-regulation. There's a lot that you have to manage after a long day of school. Child development, how old is your child, like what is appropriate, and school to home collaboration. So this is a really hefty lift, and that's why I said in the slide before, ask about it at conferences, especially in the fall. Like get ahead of yourself, and don't wait for it to be this massive blow up at home. And it really is your window, sort of, and I'm going to get into that a little bit, of what's happening at school. School day is really structured, and your kids are working on skills that are hard academically. They're keeping it together socially. They have peers, that there's a lot happening. So when they come home with homework, it shows what they are working on, and it also shows you their independence level after a long day of school with that content, with that material. Now, if your child is really struggling with homework, and not just basic, like really struggling to recall anything that they did in school, and it's not an avoidance behavior, you need to reach out to your child's teacher and come up with a plan. Homework, academic, teaching and learn is not a one size fits all, and so homework really shouldn't be as well. And so we need to get ahead of that and be proactive and make sure that it is appropriate at home. And like what Chloe mentioned with her son, and just coming up with a plan to do not 20 minutes of reading every night, that wasn't appropriate. And so your child's teacher will work with you on that. And if it is more of an avoidance piece, and then you might need some other, maybe it's a parent situation too, and not just the content. Um, and just keeping in mind a little bit of best practices in terms of executive functioning. Here's like a little rule and this rule, I will say, is for a typically developing child, someone who does not have executive functioning skill deficits. But the rule is typically 2 to 3 minutes of focus per year of age, right? So for example, a 5-year-old after the full day of school should only be expected to sit and focus, and maybe not even sit, maybe it's stand, maybe it's move around, depending on what the homework looks like and what your setup is at home, for 10 to 15 minutes before break. And I mean, I'm going to talk a lot about visual timers. Like I use them all the time. Set that visual timer, 10 minutes, check in, see how they're doing. Do you need a break? Do you want a little movement? Do you need a snack? Right? Setting up a homework routine at home is so important, and that's just best practice. And in executive functioning struggles, if you have any of those, you need to make a different plan for what homework looks like, in your house. And then, piggybacking off that, any adult who is supporting your child during homework should be on the same page. An older sibling, a nanny, a babysitter, an outside provider that comes in and might do some homework support, what that really looks like. And one of my favorite activities to do when I start working with a family in their home is to set up a homework space. And so there's fun ways to do this, and that's something that I do all the time with my families of how to set up a productive homework space that's appropriate. Thinking about a space that's not distracted, that there's not a ton of distractions around, that there's appropriate materials. And this is your time too, when you are in the classroom looking at your child's desk. See what visuals are on their desk, see what materials they use, right? If they are using cubes to count and do addition and subtraction, those need to be at your home, and they should not be held accountable to do, mental math at home if they're not doing that at school. And they should even have more supports at home because they don't have their teacher with them and it's not at the optimal time of the day. And so, like I mentioned earlier, you really need to discuss a plan with your child's teacher on how to communicate homework challenges. We talked about a little bit about environmental factors. Your child's sick, they're not going to probably get to their homework, and that's okay, but just how you talk about that with the teacher is important, and you can set that up during fall conferences.
Perfect.
Right. All right. So I kind of talked a little bit about tips and tools for home, and this could really be a whole other as well.
Yeah.
But here's some general, just simple routines that are fun, easy to do, supporting classroom learning and executive functioning skills that are going to be helpful to do at home. I love to do something called the weekly backpack dump, where you have your child. I usually do it if I'm seeing a kid later in the week. Take their backpack, dump everything out of it, including binders. Like take everything out of binders if they're using that. Take everything out of folders, and you make 3 piles. One pile is keep at home, one pile is keep in my backpack, and one pile is throw it away. Kids love it. It's so fun. You can do it on the floor, and then you can model that too with your own bag, right? I'm going to take my work bag and dump it out. There's probably stuff you're going to find, and the kids love that type of activity too. And it's a nice bonding activity. Then you can take the materials out, and any books that come home from school, you can reread those. And that's actually really helpful for developing fluency, for reading comprehension, for shared reading. It's really nice. And it's a nice way to collaborate with the teachers and builds that connection with your child of like, oh, you're reading this book. That's so cool. Maybe we can reread that together. And I will say, if your child does not want to reread any books from school and it's not like an avoidance thing and they don't, that's an interesting thing to keep note of and to mention to your child's teacher. Um, you can review work that comes home, right, in a fun way. If they come home, either early childhood classes will often play games. Play those games again. That's really fun. Even the older kids that will probably have like a Google Classroom that has games on it, that review game. Kids love to replay games that they've done at school and review work. It also builds fluency, independence, and pride. Kids will be really proud to show you what they're doing in school. Then redoing a fun class activity. If you have a child who's younger, I actually do this with my son. They send pictures of what he's doing at school. I often redo that activity with him at home. And it's just like a nice way for me to see how he's engaging with like the materials and what I can do to support him at home, build school to home connection. And it's great. And I will just, something that we talk about in education, right? For multisensory learning, repeated practice and frequent review builds long-term success. And so any way we can do that is super helpful for our children. And then some basic executive functioning tools that will work for everyone. I will also say a lot of this can be individualized based on your child's need, but visual timers, we have them all over my house. I use them during all my sessions. Kids love them. They're super, super great in building so many skills, but having them everywhere, great tool. Visual checklists and predictable routines about what it looks like after school. What does homework look like? How does that work with bedtime, with dinner, and what that, things of that sort. And that would be some things that an outside provider could help you with, and your child's classroom teacher could help you with as well.
Love all of those. Thank you, Emmy. A few more. Um, So, not to overwhelm you, and we'll give you our emails at the end of this. So, if questions come up, I know we're moving through this quickly. If questions come up, we're here for you. Um, but I'm going to come at this more from a parent perspective and what we can do, because that's really where my work has landed lately. One of the most powerful things we can do as parents is to help our kids take ownership of their responsibilities. This is powerful, but it's also really painful because sometimes giving our kids ownership means it takes longer, there are more mistakes. It can be frustrating to watch, especially in the early childhood years. But as parents, we so often fall into like a fix it mode. Emmy gave the example of homework. How are you going to handle it if your child forgets homework and it's at home? Are you bringing it to school? I love Emmy's suggestion of asking the teacher the expectations around homework. You can even ask, what do you recommend we as parents do if our child forgets their homework? Like, what is the teacher wanting her students to do or his students to do? But what's most important is when it comes to these age appropriate responsibilities, that they match not just your child's age, but their developmental stage and temperament. So, for a child that's struggling with executive function skills, which so many kids are in the early years, appropriately so, they're not developed yet, asking them to, do a 5-step morning routine to pack their backpack, pack their snack, remember their homework, get their soccer cleats, it's most likely going to be a mess. So thinking about, okay, what can I expect of my child? I would say visual prompts for younger kids are fantastic. Even for older kids, though, that I've worked with, one step at a time instead of giving them four things to focus on right away. But think about it. Is it your child remembering their folder on Fridays? Is it your child remembering to pack their homework? Or remembering to pack their snack. I had a funny situation last week with my middle son. He didn't bring his snack to school. And the teacher said, Haven forgot his snack. And I was like, well, he's actually in charge of packing a snack. And then we both laughed and we're like, he's 4. I definitely should have packed a snack. And it was a nice reminder that, you know what, we have to keep our expectations developmentally appropriate. So it can be his job to pick a snack, but I probably need to remind him to put it in his backpack. Um, and remember that with your kids, so we want to resist fixing because what we know is that in life, no one is going around fixing the challenges that come our way. So, what you can do that's a lot more effective than fixing something hard is being there for your child when it's hard. Okay. And I think that's a message just across parenting in general. The goal with our kids and teaching them how to take responsibility. The goal is not perfection. We are just looking for progress. I say progress over perfection constantly in my house, or process over product. And I'm trying to, I'm constantly working on instilling this in my kids. Um, and this is all, by the way, connected to growth mindset, which has now become a very mainstream and very important term. But we want our kids to see, and this goes back to that brain plasticity that I briefly mentioned. We want our kids to see that we can all grow, we can all improve. There's always something to work on. So, to this point, when you get back from your conference, you are going to talk to your kid. Do not avoid the conversation. Share with them I use the word glows and grows, but you can use whatever you want. Um, what are they doing really well? Like, what were the highlights? And you're going to be specific in that praise. So, not you're amazing at math, but your teacher told us that you solve word problems so thoughtfully. That's really not easy. It might not be, another example would be, we're not going to say you're a great writer. You might say your teacher told us that you're writing really long, really thoughtful stories with lots of characters. Specific praise is so much more valuable than just the you're an awesome writer or I've heard it and I wouldn't encourage you to say it, just the flat out, your teacher said you're super smart. Like, what is a child going to do with that feedback? I also would really encourage you to share what they're working on. Share it in an age appropriate way. If it's behavior, share it. It's okay. It's okay to say, listen, I learned all the great things you're doing in class. And in talking with your teacher, she said that sometimes you get kind of chatty in the classroom and it distracts you. And maybe you say, you know what? I relate to that. I used to be the same way. What are some things that you can do? How can I help you? I know it's fun to talk to your friends. Maybe that's for recess, right? Maybe you need to move seats. Let me help you. But you are going to have that conversation. The goal is not to create anxiety for our kids. The goal is to say, I am in partnership with your teacher. We are on your team and we talk. You want your child to know. And I use the word team a lot. I say to my kids, I'm on the same team as your teachers and on the same team as you. Like we are working together and our job this year is to support you. There's lots to say here, but I'm gonna end it there because we have a few more things that we need to get to, and then we're gonna move quickly, and then we'll get to Q&A. Emmy, off to you.
Okay, so we're gonna put it all together now. We're gonna kind of talk a little bit about what to do after you've gotten all this information. So what we're talking about tonight is kind of the goal. This is what good support looks like all year round, not just during conferences. Conferences are a short moment in time, but this should be happening all year. Like Coley said, I use the word team all the time, right? We're a team, teacher, me, you, to your child, your other parents, your grandparents, everyone's on your team, right? Your outside providers, if they go to OT, if they have speech, like everyone's talking and we're all on the same team together. And this is just one part, right? School day is one part. It's a big part, but it's just one piece of who you are. So this is really important to just bridge that and kind of start and frame that way with your child. Please do not, if your child's teacher says that they are struggling with fact fluency, right? Like recalling facts for memorization, that's what they're working on. Please don't go out and buy them a book with 500, addition and subtraction facts to 10. That is just going to be super overwhelming, probably frustrating. If they're working on it, it's hard and they are working on it at school. I promise you, they're also working on it in a different way. So math is probably an area that sounds like a different language to those of us who have not been in a classroom in the last 15 years, right? That it looks really different. There's some things that you're going to need education on. I've had parents when I taught first grade be like, I can't help them with this homework. I have no idea what they're asking. Like I know what 4 + 4 is, but I have no idea in what way it is being shown. So please don't go out and buy a workbook to try to fix and work on this. It often leads to frustration, memorization, and that's not the goal. It does not lead to a comprehensive understanding of the concept. Talk to your child's teacher. What can we do at home? And they might say, let them breathe. Like this is going to be a process, and they're working on it at school. Please just let them chill at home, and that's great. But seek support. Find an expert. That's Chloe and I. Like us and our teams do work on these skills at home. I will also add in, and I used to say this to parents all the time, I still do. You are mom or dad or you're a caregiver. You don't need to also be teacher. You can just be that role and say, oh, this is really hard for you. It sounds really frustrating when you are trying to sound out that word and you can't. It's difficult. We're going to find someone who's going to come in, be part of our team and work on that with you. And they can, be like, take that, off your shoulders. You're not alone. This is a lot, and there are experts and people to help. And just, remember to smile, like tell your kids how wonderful they are, that you love them, that they are working really hard, fostering a growth mindset. And just be really proud and have, just have some positives to come home and share with them as well.
I love that. It's such a simple yet important reminder. In the busyness, I think we can forget. Just say, like, I am proud of you. This is
Yeah.
hard. It's hard. School can feel very hard. I can relate. So, just so you guys all know, tomorrow we will be sending just first of all a thank you, some follow-up information, and this is 2 pages of a PDF that you'll be getting that has a glossary, some key takeaways, and a section for writing some notes and follow-up items. Hopefully, this can be a great guide for you when you go to your fall conferences and, feel free to share it with someone who might also benefit from it. I want to quickly talk about when the conference is tough. And this was not the focus of today, but so there is more to say here. I just briefly want to say, parent to parent, trust your gut. You do know your child best. That's not to say to butt heads with the teacher. We just had a situation where my son's teacher saw behavior I've never seen before. It's not my job to correct her and tell her she's wrong, but we're working together because I felt confused as a parent. So I really want to say, trust your gut. You know your child best, and your teacher is seeing another version of your child. So hear them out at least. If you are hearing big news at the fall conference, I would say it's not often I hear this from clients, but every once in a while, the fall conference is just really hard and you hear something new for the first time. First thing, and this is just a good practice in life, I'm sure we're all thinking about, is to pause before reacting. If I get a hard email, I often pause, walk away, and revisit. And I want to encourage you to do that in the moment if you hear something that stings a little bit. It can feel personal. Remember that your child's success in school is not an indication of your success as a parent. That's really huge. You are doing a great job, regardless of your child's performance in school. Sometimes generationally, now more than ever, we as parents feel like, oh my gosh, my child's success is just directly correlated to how I am as a parent. And that is not true. If you do get that hard news, you can ask for a follow-up conversation to process, to plan next steps. You can make that appointment on the spot. You can also loop in, and I encourage you to loop in specialists or admin or getting a second opinion. This is hard, and there are a lot of people within the school walls and outside of the school walls who can specialize and support you. But again, the goal is clarity, collaboration, and support. Okay. So, with that being said, we want to open it up to questions. Again, we will share our emails. So, if for some reason you would like to ask a question privately, or we're happy to do that, but we are here for you if there are any questions that have come up. We're going to stay on questions, but I am just going to put this up on the screen in case people end up having to jump off early. I have a question that came in via chat to me. So I'll start with that if people are still thinking. One of the questions was, how do we know how much academic support we should be doing at home? And I think this goes really nicely with what Emmy was saying, which is you don't need to be the teacher. Okay. I would say, especially during the school year, um, your child's in school and learning a ton day to day. So balancing support, to be honest, if your child is getting homework, I would not recommend layering on any extra work unless it's been specifically recommended by a professional in the school. So I would take the pressure of being the teacher off so you don't need to do the extra work. It's a good question. I know it's tempting, and there's also societal pressure to just keep going, do more. And that is not right for many kids. And professionally, I have not seen the benefits of that. Any other questions? I'm monitoring the chat here as well. Anything else? Okay, so if there are no other questions, Emmy, you want to quickly just give your
Yeah.
information, where to find you and all that. I'll do mine, and then everyone off and away to end your day.
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about this, but I am a learning specialist, executive functioning coach. I have a team that I work with who are like-minded, who are wonderful, and we provide academic tutoring, executive functioning coaching, and we work as parent to school liaisons. So we are collaborating with teachers, schools, parents, outside providers to make sure that your child gets the supports that they need. We work directly with your child and do sessions in homes, virtually, and in schools. We see students in person in New York City and also Fairfield County. And you can find me at www.careerfindingtoolbox.com. You can scan the QR code, and our emails are also on the takeaway sheet. You'll be getting that as well. And so overall, we just feel that there's not a one size fits all approach to anything. And so every child, every family that comes to us, we work with differently because that's just the way that everyone learns. It's different supports for different child, and that's why we're called your learning toolbox, because everyone has different tools in their toolbox to help them build lifelong success.
I love that. I can't remember who connected us, Emmy, but I'm so grateful because there's such nice synergy between our two practices. So I am also based in Fairfield, but I see clients anywhere in the world. I have a private practice, so I am not working with the kids anymore. I am working with parents, supporting them in their parenting journey and experience. So I am definitely here for the hard moments. A lot of parents come to me with a behavior challenge, an academic challenge, tension in their parenting, sleep issues, I mean, you name it, I do it. But I also do a lot of, and I'm starting to do more of just supporting parents along the way. So I'm also here to talk about major milestones and changes in development, what to think about, and just how to, I think there's a lot of noise in parenting right now, and how to just enjoy the experience and connect with your kids in ways that work for you in meaningful ways. So similar to what Emmy said, I definitely do not believe in a one size fits all approach. I do a lot of sharing of the research and what I know from my research background, and then I make it really practical for the families I work with. So I do one-on-one sessions, I do packages, I do a lot of school talks, and other kinds of events and corporate partnerships and all that. But we are here to support you. We both offer free intro calls, so you can scan those QR codes to get more information on us. I put my Instagram and email in the chat. Emmy, just do that and
Yep. Yeah.
just to be sure. But here, if you have any questions on this topic or otherwise, but we want to thank you so much for joining us
Yes.
post bedtime for some, but pre-bedtime for some based on ages in this group. We are really appreciative and we're here to support you in any way that we can. So thank you all so much for
And
coming.
we're hoping to do a part two with some questions and
Yes.
follow up. Yes.
Thank you, Emmy. Yes, we are going to be in touch because we were going to do a post-conference Q&A. We're trying to give you all some added support in this area. Thank you, Emmy. Good reminder here. I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your night.